Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
We're going to start our story by looking at it together. We're in chapter 18, and if you need to know what page that is, it's around 249. And this is how the story begins today. Daniel and 3 other young men were among those taken to Babylon as part of the first deportation of Jews prior to the fall of Jerusalem. These 4 have become the most well-known quartet of heroes in the Old Testament. They successfully adapted to the losses of home and family and survived the tough training in foreign etiquette. It is not hard to see how they quickly became the king's favorites. Our story today is about Hebrew boys that were named Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they grew up in a family that believed in the same God you and I believe in, the same God that we serve. But as you know, there was an exile. They had to leave their homes, and they had to go to Babylon, an area they had no clue what it was like, and they were afraid. They also knew that that country of Babylon did not worship the same God they worshiped. Last Sunday, Reva decided to really help the children understand how painful that would be. So during children's church, she got all the children and she said, we're having to exile. We're leaving our children's church room and we're going away. And one child said, I can't. My parents won't know where to find me. And I'm thinking, if it was that real for a child that was just getting moved in the church building, imagine how frightening it was for these 3 young Hebrew boys and Daniel to be moved out of their country. Thankfully, they had families that prepared them well. They were smart, they were educated, they loved their God, and they were prepared for the world that they were getting ready to face. You know, I always hope that for my children that I'm raising, I'm hoping that I'm preparing them. I know that you that are still raising kids, you're hoping that you give them all that they need for life. And even if you're done with raising your children, you're still hoping for them, that they find their way. This past summer, I took my oldest to get his wisdom teeth taken out. And they did something interesting for the first time in his life. They said, we're going to go over your medical history, but we don't want to do that with your parents. We want you to come in and you tell us yourself. And I thought to myself, this is good. He's got to learn how to advocate for himself and tell him, you know, his history and his medical needs. So I can hear them because I'm right next door, but I can't see them. And so the nurse goes on to ask him all kinds of questions, and he's doing great. And then she says, have you had any past surgeries? And he says, yes. And I'm thinking to myself, he has? Which of my kids have had surgery? And I'm trying to remember, and she goes, well, what did you have done? He said, I had my ovaries removed. And I say, oh gosh, and I can't go in, I'm not allowed in, and I'm hoping that the nurse figures out that did not happen. And sure enough, thankfully she realized when she said, now where was this? And he said, here. And he meant adenoids, which is true. I want to prepare my children for the world. I don't know how well I'm doing, but I know these Hebrew boys were prepared for a world that didn't even share their faith. Not just an unfamiliar place, but people that were not interested in their God. You know, it's a sweet reminder for you and me that we cannot hide from the world and say, well, I'm just going to, be with my church family and only hang out with Christians and hang out with people who believe just like me. Because we know that Jesus modeled doing life and doing his faith in the world. So I'm going to ask you a question to answer out loud, so be thinking. Nowhere in the Bible did Jesus ever say, come to the temple tonight and I will give you the word of the Lord. Never did he say, come to church and I will give you a lecture that will move your hearts. Never did he say, come to the church and that's where your faith will grow. Where did Jesus do ministry? Can you name a place where he went? The market. What was that? The road? Yes, walking down the road, down an old country road. On a mountainside. Where else? Where's that? On the lake. In the garden. Any others? He went to people's houses. You know, Jesus spent his whole 3 years of ministry out in the community. He went alongside people right where they were, and he helped them understand what God and faith and following him would be like. You know, that's my prayer for this church, is that even if you're saying this morning, well, I've already raised my kids, so I can't prepare them anymore, I hope and pray that our church sees the power of preparing students. We have a great student ministry here, and it's so important that we prepare our students, our children, and our youth to be prepared to face a world that is probably going to be quite hostile toward them when it comes to faith. Many of you sign up to help with Quest. You help send in items for our children's ministry. Some of you have served dinner to our huddle ministry on Sunday nights. If you haven't had that opportunity, or to serve at Creative Camp, it's your chance to kind of be in with the children and prepare them. I'm going to show you a picture in a minute. An interesting thing happened with our teenagers. I'm so thankful that they've caught that vision. They've done all kinds of ways to go into the community like Jesus did and reach their peers. One example is we have two of our teens that are leading the younger girl teens at the ice cream shop. They meet them at the ice cream shop. The girls get off the bus, and they meet them there, and they share their faith and share them hope and truth about Jesus. Another thing that has happened, the middle school group has decided they want a prayer club at school. So every Wednesday morning, those students show up at 7:30 in the morning and help me set up the prayer and write the verse on the board. And they pray for the group, and they're willing to read the verse out loud. And some of them have even shared their testimony. It's beautiful how our students get it, that we've got to be where people are. We do the same thing at the high school. I want to show you a picture of this one time we were on a mission trip, and there was a new house that we were going to be helping with. A mission had just taken it over. It was donated to them because it was right in the middle of a not good area in Huntington. But this woman who felt called to do this wanted to be right in the middle of the community that needed Jesus the most. So even though it's a harsh and hostile community, she wanted to be there. So we went there as teenagers, and we prayed over that house. We'd done a lot of the work, and so I said, let's just go in every single room and pray Holy Spirit over this house. And we want to reach the children of this community. So our students started praying in each room. We walked to each room of the house and literally prayed, God, send us kids that we can love like you love. Let me show you what happened the next morning. This many kids we discovered right in that community, right in that neighborhood. And what was so beautiful is we went back for 2 more years after that and continued to build relationships with those kids and give them an opportunity to hear about Jesus. That's what Daniel and his 3 friends did. You can take the picture down. They went into a world that did not love their God, an environment that was not interested in their faith. And what ended up happening to all 4 of those fellas, they sort of faced a similar scenario. Which one was thrown into the lion's den? Who was it? All right, who was thrown into the fiery furnace? They all got the same treatment. You know, life can be throwing things. This world will throw things at you, and we have to be prepared. We have to choose, kind of like these Hebrew boys, that the Lord is going to be the Lord of my mind and of my heart and of my will. So I want you to look at that for a minute. Who is the Lord of your mind? Have you decided? Have you decided in your mind that I'm going to hold on to God no matter what life throws at me? If you look on page 254, the bottom of that page shares a story of when the pressure got so great. And it says this: whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. You know, when the music would play in their village, they were demanded to bow down and worship a God that wasn't their God. But as you know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego chose not to. And what's interesting, if you think about the ones that were bowing down to the false god, some of them didn't want to either. Even if they didn't believe in the Hebrews' God, they didn't believe in this gold statue God either. But the pressure was so great, and they hadn't made up their minds, and they hadn't made their decision, so they bowed down. In the midst of the king's anger, when he realized these 3 fellows were not bowing down, he became so annoyed It says he made the furnace 7 times hotter. I'm going to say it was so hot, and I want you to say, how hot was it? You ready? It was so hot that when his men just opened the furnace door, what happened to his servant men? They were blown away by the heat and were killed. Even still, these 3 Hebrew boys had made up their mind. Have you made up your mind that no matter what happens in your life story, have you decided that Jesus will be the Lord of your life? I always tell our teenagers, you've got to decide before you get in that situation. So oftentimes when we're in youth ministry, we'll say, before you go to the party, it's okay. If you want to go to the party, go to the party. But go ahead and decide, what will I do? What will I not do? Who will I call if I'm in a situation that's not comfortable? Go ahead and make your decisions before you get there. If you're going on a date, go ahead and decide what you will do and what you won't do before you're sitting on the couch with that person. If you're going to the sleepover with a bunch of your girlfriends, go ahead and decide before you get there how you're going to spend your time, what you're going to do. I think we as adults need reminded of that too. You need to decide before you see that person how you will speak to them. You need to decide before you have that conversation with that person that is difficult for you, how you will allow them to make you feel. Maybe before you get there, you need to say in your mind, God, I am your child, and I know that whatever they're getting ready to say is not really about me. It's really sort of revealing something about them. Some of us need to decide what we will do when we're with that group that loves to engage in negativity, that love to talk about the downside, that love to talk negativity. It's a beautiful result if we make up our minds to love the Lord. And it was the verse that Barb read. The boys said, we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. I don't have to defend myself because I already know in my mind that God is my God. The boys also taught us that we have to decide who the Lord of our heart is. Again, on page 255, there's a sentence there that says this: if we are thrown into the fire, they told the king, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us. See, that's heart talk. It's deeper than just a decision of the mind. That's where your heart says, I know that my God is able, that I'm willing for him to be my first and my last. Oh, Lord, you are my everything. See, that's a conviction of the heart. That's kind of a feel it in your bones. We have to decide as individuals that the Lord is the Lord of our hearts, and so does our church, that our church believes that the Lord is the Lord of all of our hearts. I was with a group of pastors this past week. One of the things that is, I think, delightful is now that I've been appointed here, I have been assigned a group of pastors that I'll meet with every 3 months or so, and we'll get to talk about ministry and be encouraged, and they're going to do some training. So I went to my first one, and there was a pastor named Reverend Cindy who was there, and she began to share that she's done this research project all last year, and what she researched was churches that are thriving and growing and really reaching people for God. They have similar mission statements. And the same churches that were dying churches that maybe aren't doing much, that continue to dwindle, they had similar mission statements. And you know what the difference was? She said it was really simple. The ones that were thriving and growing had in the very first sentence, Jesus Christ. Something about Jesus Christ. And the ones that were not thriving had him way down after all their other issues that they want to touch and want to do in ministry. When these 3 guys were thrown into the fiery furnace, they did something interesting. As they were getting ready to be thrown in, they said this, "O King," before they spoke to him, they said, "O King." Do you know in that day, if you said, "O King," that was a sign of respect and honor? In other words, I don't agree with what you're getting ready to do. And I don't believe that should be our punishment, but I will honor you. They did no hate speech. They did not disrespect. Daniel did the same thing. On page 258, it shares the story of when he really got under pressure. But you know what? Daniel did not wag his finger at everybody. He didn't go around judging and condemning and saying, "You're all wrong. You're going to pay for this." This is what it says Daniel did. He looked out his window and he opened it toward Jerusalem, which we know would have been his home, where his heart wanted to be, where he knew he had learned about the true God. He looks out his window, he gets down on his knees 3 times a day, prayed, giving thanks, just as he'd always done. It did not deter him. When the Lord is the Lord of your heart, even when things that are hard happen, it will not make us lose our focus. Sometimes it is easy to start focusing on things in the world that we don't agree with or that don't seem right, or I don't want this to happen, and it makes us lose our focus on Jesus. I love what Jesus said in the Gospel of Mark. He said, "It's not what's out there that makes you unclean. It's what's in here." So if I can put my attention toward the Lord of my heart, I don't have to worry about all the uncleanliness around me. Finally, the boys, they also shared and showed us that the Lord was the Lord of their will. Back on 255 again, if you find this sentence at some point, I'd love for you to circle one of these words. It says this: "But even if God does not deliver us, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." See that word "will"? I'd like to circle that. I will not. That means God is the God of my will. I wonder if I can say that. I wonder if you can say that about your faith, that God, I want to be delivered. I want to be delivered from this health problem. I want to be set apart from this difficult person. I don't want to deal with them anymore in my life. God, I want to be delivered from my constant heavy heart of depression. God, I want to be set free from the anxieties and worries that plague me. But if not, I'm still with you. Everything about me will be wrapped up in you. So how will I know that the Lord has become the Lord of my will and your will? This is what happens. We begin to hold real loosely to this world and whatever happens to you and me. And we begin to understand that I am held by God. To give our will over to God means I'm going to hold loosely to this world, but I know that I will be held by you. This world isn't my home. This world cannot tell me who I am. This world is temporary. So I've asked some friends to help me explain this. Tyler, if you'll hold this end. Thank you. Jake's going to help me. Jake, you're going all the way back with this, right? You got to unravel it all the way as far as it'll go. And you show what's on the tip of yours, if you don't mind. On the tip of Tyler's rope, we're going to pretend like this whole rope is your life with Jesus. It goes on and on to eternity. But look how much of your life with Jesus is spent here on earth. Look at the difference. Life with Jesus eternally goes on, and just this much is our time here on earth. Y'all did great. Thank you. Good luck getting all that back up. We need to be reminded that this world doesn't have a hold on us. I hold loosely to this world because I am held by God. I want to close with this image. Remember when the 3 men were thrown into the fiery furnace and then the king peeked in? And how many were in there? It wasn't 3 anymore. How many was it? 4. Well, I just always knew it was an angel. That's what I'd always heard. But as I studied, I realized the king said, there's some sons of God. In other words, he knew there was something more even than an angel, but yet he didn't know their God. You know, the Son of God that was with them was Jesus incarnate. That Jesus was with them in their most difficult, dark, oppressive time. Jesus was with them, and Jesus is with you. He's with you in every part of your story. The little part that Tyler showed us that's only this long called life, and eternity, which is the long, long rope that Jake shared. As our prayer, I want us to be reminded by using our call to worship. It's in your bulletin. It says call to worship. I want us to use that as our closing prayer. It's a leader and people response. Leader says, "You are with me in the fire, and you are with me in the flood.
You are with me in the darkness. You are with me in the pain.
You are Lord in the here and now.
You are Lord of tomorrow and the next day and the next."
Amen. As we receive our offering, we'll also have some beautiful music to remind your heart that God is with you.